Hi, I'm Sashwati Sarkar and you're watching The Times of India. India has just overtaken China as the largest source of international students in the US, with over 3 lakh enrollments. But with visa caps in Canada, stricter work rules in Australia, and a surge in interest in countries like Germany and Ireland, the global map for Indian students is shifting fast. Meanwhile, AI and automation are changing the way standardized tests assess students, pushing beyond academics to evaluate real life skills. So, what does the future of education look like? And how do we make it more inclusive, especially for students from India's Tier 2 and Tier 3 towns? To break it down all for us, we are joined by Sachin Jain, country manager at ETS India and South Asia, the force behind assessments like TOEFL and GRE, and a key voice in the evolving study abroad landscape. Thanks a lot for joining us in this conversation today, Sachin. Let's dive into the questions right away. So, India has surpassed China as the top sender of students to the US, with over 3,31,000 enrollments in 2023-2024. What, according to you, is surging this drive?
First and foremost, thanks for having me here. And
the pleasure is all ours.
It's an honor to be part of this podcast. Coming to your question, at a macro level, if I were to see, it's just not US. If you look at Ireland, if you look at Germany, if you look at Canada, if you look at US, everywhere the Indian diaspora and the Indian student cohort has outnumbered any other foreign cohort in these markets. And I think at a macro level, what I see happening is that the aspiration of Indian students to kind of really go abroad, study, for becoming global citizens. Their intent is not just to study, they want to be part of a global workforce and be there as a global citizen. So that's what is driving the intent of Indian students. On the same turf, I would also say is that the number of opportunities in India for tertiary higher education are limited. And that's also one of the reasons why students choose to go abroad to study. Because we know for 16,000 seats in JEE, in IITs, you've got 1.2 million students who are sitting up for the exam. So there is limited supply of very good seats in India. So domestic supply, global aspirations to become global citizens is what is driving Indian students abroad, not just to US but to other destination markets like Germany, Ireland. That's one. Second is the need for all these economies to get skilled and highly skilled workforce. Most of these economies are aging, and innovation is the way to drive economic growth in all these countries. So that's why you need skilled and highly skilled manpower. And these countries are not looking at these students just as students. They are looking at a skilled workforce to kind of work and innovate in their country. So I think that's what is driving the growth of Indian students in all these markets. Coming specifically to US, certainly if you do any survey, even in these times,
yes, in these volatile times, in these turbulent times.
In these turbulent times also, any survey, the number one choice will still remain to be US.
Is that what your experience says?
Yes.
With students, with the,
We engage with students every day. So if you ask them that if given a choice, what would be your first port of study and where would you like to go? US certainly comes amongst the number one or the number two choices. And why? More important, understand that US has the most vibrant higher education ecosystem globally. 4,000 plus institutions among the top ranked, only 5% international students in that higher education ecosystem. So there's a huge opportunity,
potential
to grow,
absorb more,
and quality of higher education undoubtedly is very high. Along with that, the opportunities to study and then work after. I think also is one of the key, I would say, pillars and enablers for students to choose markets like US or higher education institutions in US to study and then have that global experience.
Do you think the current volatility and uncertainty and insecurities will have an impact on US's popularity, America's popularity as a study abroad destination in the years to come?
Temporarily, yes. If you ask me for the next 3 to 6 months, probably yes, no doubt about that. But in the medium to long term, no. And I say that with a conviction and a reason. Why I say that for the short term, there will be some inhibitions.
That's very natural.
And more so for Indian students, and I just bring one specific point, 70 to 75% of Indian students going abroad are graduate students.
Right.
They're not undergrad students like China and some of the other markets, which are heavily undergraduate focused markets.
Right.
A graduate student has an ability to defer, has an ability to see the things and say that I can stay back, work in India, do something, and as things settle down, I will then choose to go abroad, which is not the case with an undergrad student. So I think that's one very unique distinction with an Indian student in the short term. But as I said, in the medium to long term, the value for international higher education remains unquestioned.
My question is I understand your point when you say that for 3 to 6 months there could be repercussions, but later on also when students consider US as their destination, isn't there a possibility of them fearing that anything can happen at any point of time? The geopolitical situation is not very stable with Trump being at the helm of affairs. So, because he's here to stay. So do you think Trump being at the helm of affairs, students will, tread a very cautious path while thinking of US as their destination?
I won't fear too much for Indian students for two reasons. One is a global China plus one policy. The dependence on China is waning, which is where we as India sees a very good and a sweet spot for us to grow in bilateral trade and even in a student exchange. As you would also know, prior to, and you started with that, China was the biggest source of international students to US, which is no more the case. And that's going to go even down with all the geopolitical and trade issues between both these countries. So I think India is very well placed. Some of the current policy actions and reactions to me are short-lived. It's like just cleaning and putting the house in order. And in the next 3 to 6 months, I see a more stable policy regime, regulatory regime, because even the current administration, the Trump administration, went on record to say that they want good international students to be studying.
Trump himself has reiterated this time and again that we want good brains here.
Absolutely. And he went to the extent of saying that why are we not giving them green cards immediately they come out of a good university or a college. So I think the intent, if I go by not by the words but by the intent, I see a very positive intent because innovation is what has driven the US economy. The famous FANG, as we call them, they're all innovation tech led, and most of them are led by Indian engineers, Indian scientists. So I don't see a reason why Indian students should worry. Obviously, it's a huge financial, emotional enterprise that not just a student, his family or her family takes as you are sending your child and a student abroad. But I think 3 to 6 months, I personally feel that things should be in a much better shape.
Canada's recent cap on international student permits has raised quite a few eyebrows. Do you think this change, this strict regime, this tightening the leash, if I may call it, will direct Indian students to alternative destinations?
Great question, thank you.
Especially Indian students. While we should also focus on international students overall, But we should, you know, try to look at the Indian diaspora first. Like,
Absolutely. No, let me just peel the onion when it comes to Canada as a destination market, and what has led to the, I would say significant and massive growth in Canada. I think post COVID, the easy study visa regime that played in in Canada, because of the intent to kind of have lot more workforce in their country to really drive economic engine for Canada, led to a very easy visa regime, student visa regime.
it was not so pre-COVID.
It was not so pre-COVID. Most of the some of these kind of initiatives were post-COVID, and not just Canada. A lot of countries did that because there was a huge shortage of manpower to really drive the economic engine in these countries. Where I see today Canada is putting its house in order with all the right
Like the
intent.
US.
Because the problems in Canada were much bigger as compared to US.
The housing issue was,
What led to the housing issue? It was an unchecked flow of students into their economy, right? Without having a back end sorted in terms of where do I need to put them in houses, do I have enough jobs for them to graduate, etc., etc. So there's an entire socioeconomic kind of value system that gets created alongside international students, where kind of it faltered. The second one was that in terms of these students, I consider a good majority of them to be really disguised immigration. They were not really students who were going to Canada to study. It was in the garb of studying abroad. It was primarily disguised immigration, which the Canadian government realized, and that's where they started putting caps from 2023 onwards. And as I said, to me, this is putting the house in order to have a more stable and a growing international student, ecosystem in Canada. The value prop of Canadian higher education system still remains pretty solid. The U15, as we call them, the 15 group of 15 public universities in Canada, they are among the top notch in Canada. The biggest impact has come to these diploma mills, as we call them, because most of the growth was coming through these diploma mills, which kind of are virtually out of business, which should be the case. But even at 437,000 spots, by no stretch of imagination is a small number. And traditionally, 50% of these spots used to go to Indian students. Think of it, 180,000, 160,000 students going just to Canada for study, good students, is by no means a cap. To me, this is big enough opportunity for students who are looking to study and then work, have enough number of seats in Canada to do that. Along with that, what Canadian higher education and the regulations have evolved is in terms of the critical skills. How are you linking your post-study work to critical skills? And that's how you kind of get on the pathway of your PRs, etc. So all those systemic issues have been fixed to a large extent. The Canadian higher education ecosystem has a lot of value for the right students, and even not in terms of just studies, but also post-study work experience, and then in case they want to pursue the path of PR. So I see a lot of opportunities there, and I'm looking forward to the new government. I think Canadian elections are just around the corner, end of this month, and hopefully more stable regulations will also drive international student mobility, especially from India to Canada.
so beyond US and Canada, Germany, Ireland, New Zealand, Netherlands are emerging as promising study abroad destinations. What, according to you, should students factor in and be cautious about while choosing these destinations?
I think what this shift from US and some of the traditional markets, I see this as a very positive sign, because now students can look at a whole host of universities across geographies to really evaluate where should I go and study. So I think what is driving interest in countries like Germany, Ireland, is also because they created a playbook, their international student mobility playbook, looking at the experiences that some of the traditional markets went through. Ireland, case in point, right? 23-24, India surpassed US as the largest nationality of international students in Ireland. 7,000 plus Indian students are studying in Ireland, in a small country like Ireland. And what is driving that growth? Ireland has the third highest GDP per capita in the world.
Apart from the fact that it is known as the Silicon Valley of Europe.
Exactly. Middle of both US and Europe, right? You name any big tech company, med tech company, consulting firm, everybody is in Ireland. So there's a lot that Ireland has.
Why are they in Ireland?
Multiple reasons. One is, as being the center of between US and Europe, there are a lot of tax initiatives that Irish government, incentives that Irish government gave to a lot of these companies to set up their base in Ireland, right? That resulted in the growth. Along with that, these industries and companies work very closely with Irish higher education ecosystem. It's a very small ecosystem. 7 public universities, 14 what we call them institutes of technology. That's it. And then affiliated colleges. That's how small the Irish higher education ecosystem is. But if you look at from a cost of education standpoint, probably it is 30 to 40% cheaper than US. So and along with that, so there's a very cohesive and a symbiotic kind of a relationship between companies and universities. They work together in co-curating programs in terms of giving that experiential learning to students. And then you have post-study work opportunities in Ireland. An undergraduate student can work for 1 more year post her graduation. A graduate student can work for up to 2 years. And I must repeat this, having spoken to a lot of Indian students. Ultimate aim for an Indian student is not just to study, but to have that global exposure, to work for some time in that country, to be a global citizen, right? And you would notice that the countries that have created that path and a seamless path, which is stable and which ensures that you have 1 to 2 years at least minimum experience of working in that country, is where a lot of students are going. Germany, again, same example. You have an 18-month post-study work-ex that Germany offers, along with a very strong public university ecosystem, a lot of English taught programs, and then ability to kind of work there, which is driving growth. So this year, what we are expecting is there will be 50,000 Indian students studying in Germany. So I think all these countries have created their playbook going by the experiences that other countries had, and they are much smarter. And that's why they're not facing that same heat like some of the other countries kind of experienced during those growth phases of international students in their countries.
Great insight and very interesting pieces of information. I would someday like to delve deeper into the tax regime that you were talking about for Ireland. So the OPT program in the US offers extended work opportunities for STEM graduates. How does this fuel the interest of Indian students to study in the US?
The core, or and I may be kind of sounding like a broken record, but the aspiration of an Indian student to study abroad is to study and then work. Post-study work regime, it may be called by OPT, optional practical training in US. it may be called third graduate route in Ireland, it may be called a graduate student visa in UK. There are multiple names, right? Ultimately, they are all post-study work opportunities in US, in a country, right? OPT has got a strong significance, and again, because it is one of the most stable post-study work regimes across the world till now, fingers crossed, which offers to a STEM graduate up to 3 years, to post-study to work in US. For a non-STEM graduate, it is up to 1 year. So it's also available for non-STEM graduates.
But it's not like for OPT kind of a program is not available elsewhere in the world
It is.
for non-STEM graduates.
It is available. So, for example, in Ireland, they do not designate based upon your domain of study.
Right.
They
It's
designate
uniform
it-
across all disciplines?
Yes. So it's like undergraduate and graduate. It's level 8 and level 9 as they call it in Ireland. So every country has got a post-study work regime.
Right, every country has, but I'm just saying
The opportunities to work in US are far more because of the
it's a
size of
larger
the
economy.
size
Yeah,
of the economy, right? And a very stable. So US was the first country to have started a very structured post-study work regime, and that's why it's most popular. Just giving you some numbers, you mentioned in the beginning 331,000 students are studying in US. By any stretch of imagination, do we know how many of them are on OPT?
no, I would welcome numbers.
30% of them are actually on OPT. 90,000 plus students of this 331 are actually on OPT because their visa status does not change. It still is an F1 visa. So they're counted as part of student studying, but they're studying, they're not really studying in a college or a university, they are actually working. And Indian students have the highest cohort or the highest takers of this OPT program in US. And again, why? As a broken record, because the aspiration of an Indian student is to not just study, but study and work, to get that global exposure, to get that global experience. And that is why OPT is such a critical element in driving. And not just for US, any country, unless and until you have a mechanism, a structured process of enabling students to work in their economies, in their countries for a period of time, just students are not going to come to your country to just study. That's very clear.
With the rise of AI and automation, are the standardized tests evolving enough to assess a student beyond traditional scores? Are there any initiative? Are there initiatives to, assess or evaluate an aspirant, not, on the basis of, critical thinking skills and other assets, cognitive assets that are required in a practical job market?
No, great question. So ETS, Education Testing Service, which owns and which kind of has been the largest and the oldest assessment organization globally, is at the forefront of integrating AI into the various assessments that we deliver, including TOEFL and GRE. And we are integrating AI from the time when AI was not a household name, right? A decade
When we didn't know ChatGPT.
when we didn't know ChatGPT, exactly. So there are three specific, I would say, elements in an assessment. What we say is build, when you build a test, when you create questions, when you deliver in terms of delivering a test in a test center, and then when you are scoring. And across these three constituents, AI has been inbuilt into each and every test. For example, how do you really look at the fairness and validity of every question? There are psychometric analysis and backed by AI in terms of making sure that a question is perceived in the same way irrespective of whether I am taking it from India or somebody is taking it from Peru, because it's the same test that everybody takes. To delivering the test, there's a lot of AI-based proctoring, AI-based intelligence that goes into understanding a test taker's behavior during the test. To scoring, where there's a lot of predictive analysis based on AI that goes into scoring a test, whether the pattern, even the eye movement, to your rate of typing an answer, is that varying, etc. So there's a lot of technology in AI that goes into delivering a secure and a fair and a valid test every day across 200 countries globally. And we deliver more than 50 million tests annually across the world. So that's what is core to us as an assessment organization. Certainly, there are elements.
Course capture these essential critical skills which are required in.
So the way we capture them is in the way we build our test. And what do I mean by that? Now, the classroom of today is not the same as the classroom 40 years back.
Absolutely.
Right. The language that we use in today's lecture, in our conversations in classrooms, are completely different from what they were 40 years back. This is more of more sporadic, more intuitive, less of academic, and it's a mix of your general life which goes into the classroom. And so are the questions evolved over a period of time. It's not just a very high academic English that you would test. It is not numerical kind of reasoning just based on some textbook data. So a lot of these cognitive skills are evaluated based on real life world examples. What do you speak in a conversation, in a cafeteria, with your peers, with a mentor, an industry mentor? How would you perceive in a GRE, which is the only universal test for all graduate admissions across any domain globally, be it STEM, management, law, liberal arts, GRE kind of cuts across everything. So it's not a test of maths, it's a test of your cognitive skills essentially. Do you have the ability to take a graduate program? That's what essentially a GRE test. And hence, each and every question is designed in that manner to test those cognitive abilities of that student, whether he or she has that to really be not test ready, but be campus ready, be life ready.
But the landscape here is also changing a bit. It's a test optional landscape now. Many
question.
No, it just struck me. It's a test optional landscape now. Many universities are giving a pass to these test scores. How do you see students
I love this question.
navigating through this evolving scenario?
So I think I'll answer this at two levels. One at a regulatory level, and then at a personal, as a parent, as a parent to a student who may be going to college next year. So how do I see that? At a regulatory level, you are right. Post-COVID, and this again has been a phenomena post-COVID. Right, wherein universities started giving medium of instruction waivers, making test optional, with an intent to get as many students into their campus. There was no question on the integrity of the tests per se. It was more driven by getting more students in.
Is it about it's not about the integrity of the test. I think in the post-COVID scenario, when like the way we have seen how work from home has evolved. Before and pre-COVID, we couldn't imagine the kind of hybrid model and WFH. Now we know that it's not always necessary to work from office. You can still be equally productive while working from home. In the post-COVID era, do you think the necessity, not the integrity, I'm not talking about the integrity, the necessity of these tests has been tested?
Great question. ETS has been at the forefront when it comes to addressing these unique challenges. In COVID, all test centers were closed. How do you really go to a test taker who still wants to take the test? We were the first organization to start at-home testing when nobody else thought of it, immediately after COVID. So it is something that we believe as an organization. That's our mission, to be really accessible to everyone who intends to take that test. That said, the need for these tests and standardized tests is increasing day by day. Why? At the beginning of our conversation, we talked about the need for getting genuine students. Now think of a university, think of a country where students from multiple nationalities are coming in, standing at their visa borders, at their border control, and how do you figure out the intent of that student? You are just carrying your school and a college mark sheet, a statement of purpose, letters of recommendation, right?
And maybe if somebody has carried out any
some projects,
extracurricular,
some projects, that's it. But those are very, very country specific. Now, how do you really say that, okay, fine, is there a real intent of this person to study? The standardized test is one of the key critical ways of figuring out that, yes, I intend to study, and hence I have taken an English language test like TOEFL. I have taken a graduate test like GRE. And the language of that test is the same, no matter you are coming from India, China, elsewhere. Because
that's
it's the same
standardizing
score.
denominator.
Right. I'll add one more thing. And I was talking about the playbooks that some of these emerging markets have taken. You look at Ireland, and I keep bringing some of these countries, Germany, because they are kind of in getting a lot of eyeballs in terms of the growth of international students. If you look at these countries, they figured out that we also need to have some checks and balance to ensure that the student who is crossing into my country is a genuine student. And hence they enshrined English language testing scores in their visa process. You need to have this score to get a visa. Forget your application and admission to university. If I don't see your ELT score or TOEFL score, sorry, I am not going to let you in. Case in point, last month in March, US proclaimed through an executive order English as a national language.
Right.
What is the need for US to do that? What is happening at a macro level is that governments are also realizing that it is also their job to really have a say in letting students in. Medium of instruction waiver is something which is the prerogative of a university. Fine, you may want to do that, please go ahead and do that. But as a regulator who has to issue a visa, I need to be better better placed, and I have got data points to ensure that the student who's coming into my country is really a genuine student. So for where we are seeing and where I am seeing is probably there's going to be a reversal in the next 12 to 24 months. Why it's Ireland, Germany are not facing the same issues that others face? Because they always had these checks and balances inbuilt into their visa regulations. They never relied just on universities. Right. So there is a very strong and a genuine correlation between these standardized tests and the success and ability of student to complete the studies, because we are not testing a core subject in your program. We are testing those basic cognitive skills that you have to complete that program.
Right. Right.
So I have a slightly contrary way there, that I believe that in the next, whatever is happening, all the major markets are putting their houses in order, and hence the need for standardized testing, the need for TOEFL, need for GRE is only going to increase in times to come.
Even in a test optional landscape. And with, top-notch universities are actually making it test optional. And students now also have the liberty to choose whether they want to put their, use their SAT scores or their ACT scores?
The moment it becomes like the moment it is enshrined in the visa, universities, whether they are test optional or not, do not have a choice.
Right.
Because, and I'll add one more thing here. Good that you raised this point. We did a survey at ETS, right, of Indian TOEFL test takers of 2023. And 85% of Indian TOEFL test takers who submitted their TOEFL scores confirmed that they got the student visa.
Okay.
The point again validates what I'm trying to say, that governments are looking for those markers, that how do I differentiate Sachin whether it's genuine or not genuine. Okay, fine, he has all the GPAs, he has got all the projects, he has got good SOP, got good LOR, which I don't understand because it is coming from a country that I'm not too familiar with.
Moreover, it's not a neutral LOR.
It's not standard, right? But I have got a TOEFL score, I have got a GRE score, which I know if somebody has got 90 on out of 120 in TOEFL, it's a seal that I have got decent English language competency, which I can compare to anybody else who's crossing the borders. If I've got a score of 300 on GRE, it gives me relief as a visa counselor that yes, the student has gone over and above what is required to really showcase his or her intent to be a genuine student.
ETS has been instrumental in English proficiency tests. So, do you, tweak your tools or kind of make changes that are necessary in your tools to accommodate students from tier 2 and tier 3 cities?
Yes, and those changes are made every day. So it's a dynamic testing environment. At a global level, what I must share this with you. So in 2023, prior to 23, TOEFL was a 3-hour test. July 2024 or 23, we made it a 2-hour test.
Okay.
Without changing anything. So the score scale remained the same, the integrity, validity, everything remained the same. We reduced the duration. Again, to make it more accessible. Right. So that's one way of kind of addressing the needs of current test taker. It is not a test of endurance. It's a test, as you rightly said, of your cognitive abilities.
Yes.
We don't want to see how much you can endure sitting in a chair for 3 hours or 4 hours. That's not really the purpose.
That's done at the CBSE and ICSE levels.
Similarly, GRE was a 4-hour test, 4 hours with a break in between. Today it is a 2-hour test. So that's at one level how we bring kind of accessibility, especially for markets like India, and to be kind of relevant for the tier 2, tier 3 audience.
They don't normally come from an English speaking background. They do come from, this is very incorrect to say, but English language is a big challenge for them.
Great point.
So how do you adapt your tools to?
If I share with you some data, and you must have seen that in e-commerce, and
you can share some personal anecdotes also with the students that you have.
Sure. So, and I'll share some data around that also. What we are seeing, the biggest growth markets for us at TOEFL and GRE, out of top 10 cities in India, beyond the 4 metros, all other cities are tier 2 cities.
Like, if you could name a few.
Khammam in Andhra, Guntur, right? You talk about Surat, you talk about places like Coimbatore, Thane. So the point that I'm trying to make is, A, the English language competency is good, not great. Aspiration to be a global citizen is much higher. And that's where they're ready to work, slog it out.
How big is the gap between skill and will in terms of language?
It's shortening. The gap is shortening. I'll give you some scores. So average India score on TOEFL For 2024, I think it's around 95 out of 120, which is not at all bad. It is pretty good. This is the average India of all the test takers in India across any city. 95 is the roughly that's 94 or 95 is the average score, and that itself talks about the skill and the will. But this 95% or an 80%, the aspiration is to go to 100 plus.
Okay.
That's the aspiration. How we are working for that aspiration to really kind of fructify and kind of be with them in their journey. So for India as a market, test prep is something which comes very organic to an Indian student. We have all been through this test prep journey throughout the entire K-12 system, right? So we understand that.
We know the grill and the drill.
So that will is always there. What we are doing to support that will is to come up with very affordable, in fact almost free, test prep from ETS and through ETS partners, right, which is given to any student who intends to take an English language test. So we have a beginner's guide for TOEFL, which is given to anybody who intends to take an ELT. Forget which ELT. This is a guide that helps you just understand what the structure of the test is, free of cost. We are coming up with a test prep book, which is close to 1,100 rupees free to any student who wants to now take TOEFL. Here is your resource. One book completes everything. There are a lot of QR codes, interactive material, which you can do on your mobile. Test prep subscription for less than 500 rupees. 2-month subscription, which has got mock tests, sample questions, etc. A whole host of activities. So we also want, because India again is a very price sensitive market. Yes. And we all, as a parent, I also see that there's a huge enterprise that a parent takes. So we said, why are we not enabling that for an Indian student? Because it is just not for study abroad. Think of it, the chances of you growing in your career are much higher with your good English language competency skills. I come from a very humble background from Delhi. It is my exposure that's why I'm sitting in front of you. Simple as that. So this is what, and education is the biggest economic lever for an Indian student. That is why education is among the top 3 categories in our consumption basket. As a parent, I can do anything to get the best of education for my child, and so would you, right? So that's the general sentiment. We cut on everything else, but we will not compromise on education.
On education, yeah.
So this is.
I come from West Bengal, where education, like even in a marriage market, they don't see what the guy does, how educated he is.
Exactly. So yeah, so we all kind of have that same journey from students to where we are. It is our education, our exposure that has brought us. So that's our, I would say, give back to Indian students, that hey, we are creating a very vibrant, holistic ecosystem of test prep for you, almost free, almost virtually free. Please take it. And this is going to help you not just for your study abroad or for your TOEFL exam, but consider this as a life skill.
So the NEP, sheds a lot of light on internationalization, globalization of education. Do you see Indian institutes, Indian colleges and Indian schools aligning with this vision, to attract more international students?
100%. If I speak to 100 universities in India, 100 of them want to diversify.
What are they doing to fulfill that want?
Yeah. There's a lot of active outreach, at least now I'm seeing, not just for students, even for international faculty. They are a lot more flexible, open to attract international faculty to at least teach for a semester, 2 semesters, not for a long duration. So there's a lot more openness, there's a lot more intent, and there's a lot more, I would say, drive of Indian institutions to really infuse internationality at a classroom level, both in terms of faculty, coursework, and students, because everybody sees the value of it. So that's at one level. Even the Government of India with Study in India initiative, the new portal that has been launched a year back, I think is a step in the right direction easing the visa regulations for foreign students. Still, we are far away from where we should be. Even today, we are at 50,000 international students versus 500,000 in China. China is 10x of us.
Right.
What we are doing and what we are working with universities and also discussing with government is, for example, GRE. GRE is the Universal Graduate Admission Test. Stanford's to MITs, even after test optional, they still value your GRE score, especially for some of their coveted programs, right? So that's how they differentiate a student in terms of whether they have the GRE or not the GRE. Roughly 400,000 students globally take GRE every year. So there are 400,000 intended students who want to study abroad. Now, where we would like to partner with the Indian government, with the Indian institutions, is that you have a very vibrant graduate program and a base of institutions in India, right from IITs, IIMs to a whole host of other institutions. And
very potential base.
Very potential base. Now, all these institutions, if they go out to these 400,000 students globally and say that, hey, look at my program, look at my institution as well. If you want to do in management, why just looking at Europe or US? I can give similar education at probably half the cost in the most fastest growing economy on this earth. So that's our point of view, because the kind of opportunities to work in this country you will not find in other places, because India is growing. The entire startup and otherwise the corporate ecosystem is growing. So that's our pitch, that start including GRE as part of your graduate admission process.
Okay.
Because if MIT, Stanford can take students, why can't IITs, IIMs? Cannot expect today a student to take a GATE or a CAT only. And the more you have these foreign students, foreign faculty, automatically it's going to be a very evolved ecosystem within a campus. Plus, it also helps you in growing your ranks. India fares very poor when it comes to ranking.
QS rankings.
ranking. And one of the reasons is internationality, as you rightly pointed out, both on the faculty side and on the student side.
Financial constraints are a big roadblock for study abroad aspirants, especially from countries like India. So, how can they? What resources can they avail to, breeze through this hurdle?
No, I think that's very core and fundamental to all of us as parents also. It's a big financial enterprise that we all have to take. But I would not say that just for study abroad. Even
in India,
even
right?
in India now, you would appreciate that the cost of education
has gone up
significantly.
Cost of school education. Look at the way school fees are escalating.
Absolutely. So it's I think it's a phenomena which we are experiencing even in India. So I look at this at two levels. First is, especially on the higher education, global higher ed, there are enough and more financial institutions that are now working in making this journey more palatable, more affordable through study abroad loans. But again, those loans are linked to the kind of school, program, country that you are going in for. Because ultimately they also want to kind of cover their risks.
Absolutely.
So for a good student going to a good program in a good university in a country which is growing, the chances of financing your higher education are plenty. And some of the loans are non-collateralized because they believe in the value of that education that will pay back. So I think that ecosystem has evolved very well in the last decade or so. And there are a whole host of opportunities. That's at one level. Second is scholarships. There are a lot of scholarships, both government and in the PPP mode or private scholarships that are available to students, right from Tatas to Reliance, to Aga Khan Foundation, to Inlax, and students would know more because as Indians, the first port of call is that, hey, is there a scholarship available? Let me just figure that out.
And India is a price sensitive country for very obvious reasons. So, I would like to hear from you a little more about the financial opportunities that students can tap into, if you could.
Yeah, so I think at 3 levels. First is start your study abroad journey early. Do very good research in terms of programs, in terms of universities that are offering those programs and post-study work opportunities in those countries. I think they're all linked. So hence a good research on that is very important. On top of it, I would say that look for programs and look for those skills at the time of graduation, not at the time of entry. You mentioned about AI, and I'm using AI in a different context. The sectors or that are going to be disrupted by AI, should you be going to go for programs that are going to be disrupted? That's not a smart decision to make, right? So look for sectors that are going to use some of these new age technologies to really grow.
Right.
So, and of late, I'm hearing so much about medtech. I'm hearing so much about convergence of medicine and technology, biotech, biopharmacy. There's so many new emerging domains.
Bioengineering,
right? Even on the pure tech side also, sustainable energies. You talk about renewables. There is a whole host of research and growth that is happening in driving some of these new age technologies. But yes, if you're still focused on coding, please think through it, because 4 years from now, even today, Google has publicly stated that 50% of its coding today is done through
AI.
Which is only going to grow.
Yes.
Which means that if you are a very good coder, you still have some chances to get through. But if you are in the middle level, your job is not going to be there 4 years when you graduate. So look for areas that are emerging. Space tech. There are so many such opportunities that are emerging today that students should do a good research on. So I think that's at one level. So from program, university, country. Second is financing options. How do you finance that? And that's the reason I always say start early, start a year in advance. So if you want to go for fall of 26 for your admission to a specific country, start that process today. In terms of start doing that research, what is it required? There are a lot of scholarships linked to TOEFL and GRE. Unless and until you have a good understanding of that, okay, fine, if I take this test, I'll give you one example. There are so many live cases where students got to a teaching assistantship, a research assistant at a university based upon their TOEFL and GRE scores.
Right.
These are, to your point, a standardized test is just not an admission to the university. It's making you career ready, life ready. And these are some of those intangible benefits that comes to you along with some of these tests. Because when you go for a teaching assistant as part of your master's program and they say, okay, fine, I will give you a teaching assistantship only if your TOEFL score on speaking is above 25. A TA in a good university in US can give you anywhere between $2,000 to $3,000. You will be the king on the campus in your dorm. Besides what it brings on your CV. So research is very important, both in terms of program, then your financing options, scholarships. What are the various scholarship options? Last but not the least is working while studying. What is the minimum wage rate in a country? How many hours can I work in a week? Because that also helps me support my studies.
Absolutely.
So these are the four key parameters that as a student, I would like anybody to look at in creating a view, in forming a view, whether I can do this or not.
So that reminds me another thing. Like, we have seen of late many students quitting their part-time jobs in the US because there are some legal issues.
Legal issues.
So the on-campus jobs are all right, but off-campus jobs come with some legal challenges, right?
Till the time it is within the defined boundaries, that if your visa allows you to work 20 hours a week, that's fine, still within that ambit, because it doesn't say it has to be on campus or off campus. It's a part-time job. But where students go beyond those 20 hours and really working for 30, 40, 50 hours,
That is where the problem
that
lies.
is where the problem lies. And those are the students who are most worried.
Why are these problems erupting now? Like, they have been doing this for years now.
Nobody was checking them. Nobody was checking them. And it was also, I would say, the selfish interest of the small and medium enterprises who were employing such students at cheaper rates than a regular employee. So there was a vested interest of some of these businesses which actually was harming students more than actually helping them. Because they were also moving away from studies. You are there to complete your program with good grades, get all that experiential learning, get those projects in, because that's going to help you get to your job in your OPT. Your summer or a part-time job is not going to get you to the OPT at a good university or get to a sponsored visa. Your research, your projects, what you did in your program is what's going to help you get there.
Right. Now, coming to the last and very important question of our enlightening discussion is public-private partnership. I mean, these partnerships have been touted as the solution to many educational challenges. How have these partnerships so far increased the access to global higher education?
Great question. Great question. Lot has been done, but lot more can be done. So I mentioned about some of these large organizations who have stated scholarship policies for students who want to study abroad. Tata's, Reliance, Aga Khan Foundation, Inlax. So these are private bodies who have created a corpus for scholarships for students who aspire to study abroad. Even Aditya Birla Group. And you would have seen the scholarships that they give out to students every year. So all the meritorious students, they have opportunities to go for these scholarships and many more. Some of them like Fulbright, etc., which are more government sponsored, are also there in them. At ETS level, I must share this with you. So last year we gave scholarships to 19 scholars from India who took a master's program in UK as part of a UK-India scholarship program. Each one of them got 2.5 lakh rupees as part of their to support their studies in UK. And we also come up with many more such scholarship schemes with universities, etc. Because at the end of the day, ETS has a mission of providing access, as you rightly said, to meritorious students. I must share with you, and as a thought through this platform also, one of the ideas could also be that similar to a Prime Minister Relief Fund, we have a Prime Minister Scholarship Fund.
Right.
Right. For meritorious students to avail that scholarship, to go abroad and study, with a caveat that after your studies you have to come back and work
for the country.
Or work for the country. And the funding of this Prime Minister Scholarship Fund could be through anyone. Anyone can contribute to that scholarship, but it creates a common pool of funds that can be used by India to for students to go abroad for higher education, but they have to come back. You come back and work, but you have to come back and contribute to India. But I think that's something which is the need of the hour, to your point, which is a clear example of a PPP. It's a public-private partnership.
Thanks a lot for giving us your time, your views, your information, and your knowledge, sharing your knowledge with us. And it's really, it has been a very, I would say it's one of the most interesting conversations that I have had regarding study abroad so far.
The pleasure is all mine. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.